Well, hello everyone. I just wanted to wish everybody a happy St. Patrick's Day. For me, it's very strange because I haven't set foot in Ireland for 15 months now, and those of you who know me know, I do lots and lots of tours in Ireland. So it's very strange not to be in Ireland for St. Patrick's Day and to be stuck here in Brighton. And how did I celebrate? Well, I went to get my first vaccination, so that's something at least. Anyway, because it's St. Patrick's Day, I wanted to talk a little bit about my favourite Irish writer, William Butler Yeats, um, who was one of the foremost figures of 20th century English literature. Sometimes I think it's forgotten that Ireland, for such a small country, has produced so many outstanding writers in the English language, including full Nobel Prize winners for literature. You have people like Oscar Wilde, of course, Samuel Beckett, James Joyce, Brendan Behan, Bram Stoker, Patrick Kavanagh, George Bernard Shaw, all these fantastic writers and all Irish. And when I do tours, one of the things we do on our way to Galway is we go through County Sligo. And I love Sligo. I mean, first of all, you have the wonderful, wonderful mountain of Ben Bulben. And Ben Bulben is a fantastic, beautiful looking piece of scenery. I put it as my Facebook picture at the moment. It's astounding, astounding area of natural beauty. And just under the shadow of Ben Bulben, you have just outside the little village of Drumcliff, you have the churchyard of St Columba's Church. And it's there that William Butler Yeats is buried. He always wanted to be buried in Sligo, under the shadow of Ben Bulben. And we're going to see in a moment how that came to pass. But about the man himself, as I say, he was actually born in Sandymount in County Dublin, but he spent many, many happy day as a child in County Sligo. He had a long interest in strange things like mysticism and spiritualism and astrology and folklore. He collected a lot of the old folk tales from the west of Ireland about the fairies and the leprechauns and the banshees. When we talk about fairies in Ireland, we're not talking about the cute Tinkerbell type fairies. They're evil little feckers, the fairies in Ireland, and they love to play tricks on humans. And perhaps that's something I can talk about at some other point. Anyway, to get back to Yeats, the great love of his life, his muse, and the woman he was besotted with from the very first meeting was a woman called Maud Gonne. Maud Gonne was a Irish nationalist. She believed that Ireland should be free of British rule, and Yeats was completely obsessed with her. He proposed to her 4 times, and she turned him down 4 times. He wasn't really a man to take a hint, I guess. And some people believe that Yeats is. He claimed to be an Irish nationalist himself and a patriot, but many people think he just did that to try and win influence with Maud Gonne. Anyway, he was a very important literary figure. I think there's no doubt about that whatsoever. And in 1899, he was one of the 3 founders of the Abbey Theatre in Dublin. Abbey Theatre is still there in Dublin, but it was the first theatre in Ireland to put on plays in the Irish language. And he founded that with 2 other very important people from the Irish literary movement. John Millington Synge. Synge had written a play called The Playboy of the Western World, which when it opened in New York, caused riots for its depiction of the Irish. The other person who's not often talked about, outside literary circles at least, was Lady Gregory. Now, Lady Gregory lived on an estate at Coole Park near the town of Gort in County Galway, and she was perhaps the most important influential figure in the Irish literary revival. She encouraged many, many people, including Yeats, including James Joyce, and she had many visitors to Coole Park. And she would encourage, rather than have you would go to many people's houses and they would have like a guest book where you sign your name in the guest book. But what she encouraged her guests to do was to carve their name or their initials on a copper birch tree, which was in the grounds of Coole Park. So you can still go to Coole Park. It's the house is no longer there, but the birch tree is still there, and you can still see, very faded, but you can still see the initials in there: William Butler Yeats, John Millington Synge, Sean O'Casey, and GBS, George Bernard Shaw. Although Yeats was from a wealthy Protestant family, he was a believer in the cause of Irish nationalism. Although he didn't take part in the 1916 rising against the British, the Easter Rising in Dublin, but he did write a wonderful poem which was simply called 1916. And the last line of that poem, very famous last line of that poem, where he wrote, "Changed, utterly changed, a terrible beauty is born." And 1916 was the turning point in Ireland, in Irish history. It was the beginning of the end of British rule, which would finally come in the early 20s with the War of Independence. In fact, Yeats was appointed a senator for the very first Senate after Irish independence, when Ireland became a free state. Now, he moved to France. He spent his last years in France, in the south of France, in a little place called Menton. And that's where he died in January 1939, January the 28th. A few weeks before his death, he wrote to his sister in Ireland, and he said to her, "If I die, bury me up there, and then when the newspapers have forgotten me, dig me up and plant me in Sligo." Because Sligo had such fond memories for him from his childhood, and he'd always said he wanted to be buried in the shadow of Benbulben. But he wanted the fuss to die down about him, and then once all the fuss had died down and he was forgotten about, he'd liked his body to be shipped back to Ireland. And that's what happened in September 1948. So 9 years after his death. Not as quietly, perhaps, as he might have hoped. There was huge fanfare over this. His body was dug up from the cemetery in Menton, and it was placed on an Irish Navy corvette ship, sailed to the port of Dublin, where it was unloaded, placed on a train that took it to the town of Sligo, and then from Sligo, the funeral cortege made its way to the churchyard of St Columba's, just outside the little village of Drumcliff. And you can still go there now, and indeed, every tour I did in Ireland, I would always take my groups to Drumcliff, and lovely little church, St Columba's Church there. And Yeats's grave, if you're facing the church, is just to the left of the church, and it's a very simple grave. Oftentimes I'm there with groups, they're expecting some fantastic ornate gravestone, but it's a very, very simple grave. And the epitaph, which Yeats wrote himself, which is on the gravestone, simply says, "Cast a cold eye on life, on death, horsemen pass by." And I think what Yeats was saying was like, don't waste your time coming here to look at my grave. I'm gone now. I wasn't really a person of much importance. Which is ironic because today so many tour groups stop there to see the grave of Yeats. It's a lovely little cemetery. Well, it's a lovely little wall cemetery. And it always brings to mind that Oscar Wilde once said about cemeteries. He queried, why do people build walls around cemeteries? Because those on the outside are not in any hurry to get in, and those on the inside are not in any situation to be able to get out. But anyway, I just want to say a little bit about William Butler Yeats. He's, after the great Chilean poet Pablo Neruda, he's probably my favourite poet of all time. And if you ever get a chance to go to Ireland, to travel through Ireland, do make sure you have a stop in Sligo and go and visit Yeats's grave. And also you'll get those fantastic views of Benbulben. And I just wanted to finish really by just reading my all-time favourite Yeats poem for everybody. And it's called The Cloths of Heaven. Had I the heaven embroidered cloths, enwrought with gold and silver light, the blue and the dim and the dark cloths of night and lights and the half-light, I would spread the cloths under your feet. But I, being poor, have only my dreams. I have spread my dreams under your feet. Tread softly, because you tread on my dreams. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone.